Welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Garland.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have a really special episode. We have a patient, Karen, and out of respect for her privacy, we're not going to reveal her last name, but we are so excited to have her here today. She's going to share her patient journey with irritable bowel syndrome with constipation. Now, we've done a few episodes about this topic because it's such an important topic and it's not often talked about. It can be embarrassing for patients, and we want to break the stigma. And Karen has graciously agreed to be with us today, and we want to thank her and welcome her to the show today. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, share a little bit about what my journey was, and hope I can say something that will impact one person, 10 people, whoever it would be valuable to.
Well, thank you. And we're so grateful. You know, it's not always easy to share stories, but the more we talk about it, the less shame and stigma is surrounding it. So again, thank you so much. How did your journey start? And what were you experiencing, and how long did it take you to get an accurate diagnosis? I know that's like the $1 million question.
That's the $1 billion question. So it's, for me, I was an extremely healthy person, never went to the doctor for much of anything but normal health related things. And it was 2009. I remember very distinctly, back-to-back illness, back-to-back antibiotics, and my health just took a huge crash in 2009. And it took about 8 years to actually get a diagnosis.
So when you say your health took a dive, what's some of the symptoms that you were experiencing?
So the symptoms were widespread. My digestive system was not functioning. I dropped weight out of nowhere. I had incredible fatigue. So it was neurological, it was digestive, and of course, energy levels were just very, very different.
Well, yeah, if you can't absorb proper nutrition and you're in pain, that's going to affect your energy. Oh my goodness. So, keep telling us about what's happened.
So it started, and you would never necessarily link the two, but it really started with an upper respiratory infection at the time. And I was being treated for an upper respiratory infection. And it was really probably a combination of a lot of different things. So I had an illness. There was definitely an immune issue going on. There were a lot of antibiotics thrown into my gut. There was a lot of stress in my life with being a mother of 3 young kids. And so it was kind of a perfect storm. And the digestive tract took probably the hardest hit.
So your whole guts are like just exploding. Everything's going on. It's like the battle of the gut bugs, good and bad everywhere.
Yes. Wow. And I would say, I would go to a lot of different doctors, and they would look at me like, why are you here? Everything on the tests were coming back normal. The biggest thing that nobody could really understand was the drop in weight. And I was having abdominal pain that was unexplainable. No test could explain the severe abdominal pain.
You know what's interesting, and I think we're going to do an episode coming up about those tests. We get those reports of our blood tests and, it's normal. No, there are ranges, people. There are ranges. I learned this with my dogs because one of them early on had a lot of issues with his immune system. And I know I'm not comparing animals to people, but I learned a lot. Just because everything is normal doesn't mean everything is normal. Because if you want a doctor to look at it holistically,
yes,
and to see if you're on the lower end of all of them or the higher end or certain things, it's a puzzle. And you want the doctor to be able to look holistically at it to see what's going on and almost track what's been happening. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. It's like, it's normal. But we're not feeling normal, right? And that's what you said. You don't feel normal.
That was exactly my situation, because I can't tell you the number of tests, the amount of money I spent on tests, and I fell into normal ranges of almost every single test, and where they even thought, well, maybe she's on the edge here. Nothing ever panned out to come up with a proper diagnosis. And in fact, I could go, that's a whole nother story in terms of what they labeled me as, because they felt like they had to say something.
Well, hopefully they didn't label and say it's all in your head, because we've heard that so
Yes.
many times. They did all in your
Yes.
head. That is
Yes.
so common. And
Yes.
it's so common, and it's really sad because it's not all in your head. There is a brain gut interaction and axis, but it doesn't mean it's all in your head, because there are neurons and there are nerves and there are, things are affected and it impacts one another. And it makes me sad to hear yet another patient saying they were told it's in your head. You're just making this up. Like, we really want to go to the doctor 5 million times and spend all this money on tests.
And I knew something was wrong. I knew that I knew I was experiencing pain. The doctor said, everything's fine, just ignore your pain. They diagnosed me with health anxiety. Is that I guess that's really in the DS. It's an actual thing, health anxiety. And my weight loss was unintentional anorexia. That's, I guess, a diagnosis.
Wow.
It was not unintentional anorexia. I can tell you that.
Now, when you ate, did you feel pain?
The answer is I was in pain all the time. And so, and I had so many different people, I will say, feed ideas into my head of, don't eat this, don't eat that. This is what's causing it. So I was eating, but I was down to like 20 different foods. If there's thousands of food choices, I was like, I think this is a safe food to eat. I think I can eat that. So yeah, is there a level of anxiety in there? Sure. Wouldn't you be? So I'm not saying it was a wrong diagnosis. But I just think I had no desire to eat, but I knew I had to eat in order to have fuel in my body.
So how did you function in life with all this pain and not being able to have, normal bowel movements? I mean, oh my goodness, what did you do? How did you do this?
Honestly, when you ask that question, I feel tears come to my eyes because it's a deep, dark place to be. How did I function? There were times where I didn't, meaning like I was on the couch, I was miserable. I didn't want to be around anybody. There was a holiday party, there's food. I don't want to be around it. My poor kids kind of lost their mom for a season. My husband lost his wife for a season. And I described that visit when I went to see that particular doctor, and I probably was clinically depressed. I would not have admitted that at the time, but it is very hard to go through life when you have the physical pain, the deep dark cloud, and all you want is to feel better. And at the same time, you're like, I just want to lay down and go to sleep and kind of not deal with this. It's hard.
It's hard. And, I have family members, grandmother and mother, who dealt with that for years, the same thing. And my grandmother, I wish I was Gastro Girl then, because she was a lady who was popping laxatives like nobody's business. And her day, a good day for her, was based on whether she went to the bathroom or not. And looking now, knowing what I know now, she probably had some pelvic floor issues that were never addressed. It was just, here's a what is that pink pill, that Correctol, or drinking that Senna, and I just remember the agony that she was in. And the same thing with my mother. And, she really, she passed away a few years ago, but she, I think a lot of her issues were GI related, and she never really she was a nurse, never wanted to go to the doctor. And she struggled with this, lost tons of weight and all this stuff. So I feel for you going through that and other patients, and I personally experience with it. And it kind of drives why I do what I do in a lot of ways. But you persevered, and you got yourself out of that situation. You didn't give up. And that's the message that we really want to convey. And I'm so grateful for your generosity of spirit in saying that to our listeners.
It's hard to be on either side of this equation, because if you're the daughter, you're obviously missing out on your mom. If you're the mom, you're feeling guilty because you can't be there. So there's a lot of, I'll say there's a lot of emotional baggage that accompanies this. And all the while you just want to feel better. And so I'll say there needs to be a lot of grace extended, a lot of love and encouragement, and remind those that are impacted, like even just I appreciated that my husband was there by my side. It was hard for him. Nobody wants to see their wife in that kind of a state, but thank the people that are around you supporting you too.
Yeah. And for those that may not have spouses, or maybe they're not with family members and they're alone, you're not alone, because you have this whole community out there that's involved with digestive health, with GI issues, that really care. The science and the advances that we've made just in the last 15, 20 years, 10 years, even 5 years with dietary stuff, a lot of it is amazing. And it's continuing to evolve. Tell us, what changed and how you started, and how long did it take you to get to the right physician and then the right diagnosis? Like, what was that like?
I was not really interested in seeing another healthcare professional ever again in my life. I had reached that place after 8 years of knocking on doors. I was really kind of done. And there was a local doctor who was doing a free seminar. And I thought, okay, I'll go listen to this doctor. And so when I went to the seminar, I thought, okay, I'll go make an appointment and just talk to this doctor. And he was talking about the gut biome. And so when I went to see this particular doctor, he listened to my story very well, but he said to me very, very clearly, he said, Karen, I can't help you, but I know someone who can. And he pointed me to a doctor in North Carolina. And that particular doctor had done decades of research on the gut-brain axis, and went for an appointment. I think it was 2017. So, that's been...
Wow, you were really struggling for a long time.
Yes. It was a long time. It was a long journey. It was a very, very long journey. But by the time I went to see that doctor, it wasn't like I arrived at the low spot overnight. So it was a thorough understanding of where I had been. He requested all of my healthcare records over the past 5 years. So it was a stack. And he read through the entire thing and referenced things in my patient file. And I was like, wow, he actually read it. He actually understands. And that began the journey of, I will say, being educated down the right path and having treatment that was appropriate. And rather than just being kind of pushed off to the side, you have IBS, it's all in your head. He takes IBS from a gut-brain standpoint. And I think there's like 40 individual diagnoses that fall under that.
Oh, yeah. Now, we've learned, from our research and from our experts, including the doctor you're mentioning, the importance of the physical exam.
Yes.
When you went to all your doctors, were they doing these exams? Were they doing the rectal exam to make sure there was nothing, wrong?
I'm going to say throughout all the testing that I had over time, so in the 8 years of really searching, yes, there were some doctors, but it was not the thorough. This was a 2.5 hour intake appointment. So it was a conversational, historical, physical, even from an emotional standpoint. My husband joined me. He was very much wanting you to have family support. This was most people that get to that point, they know and they recognize this is not just your simple 30-minute office visit.
Yeah. And I want to point out what you said. It took a long time. And as patients, it's not always easy to get that time, but with the right doctor and the right environment, you can get that time. It takes a while to get to that point, but I like your patient advocacy, and you're letting us know that they looked at your whole history. Yes. So if you're listening out there, what Karen said, the doctors look at everything. Yes. Then they're going to go bring you an exam. They're going to talk to you. Are there stuff in your life that's been happening that could, there's trauma that has a relationship with IBS and other brain gut disorders. There's PTSD and anxiety. And what you said about health anxiety, being so traumatized to go to the doctor and being told nothing's wrong with you, and you don't believe them because something's wrong with you, that's anxiety inducing in itself.
What I will also say is never give up, never, ever give up. And did I feel like at times like what's the point? I'm just going to get another, everything's fine. You are your own best advocate. And there are doctors out there who truly care and who truly want to listen and understand. And I don't mean to disparage all the other doctors who wanted to help me. They just were not educated to understand the depth of what I was dealing with.
Yeah. And none of us want to do that. The doctors work very hard. Not all are created equal. Not all focus on the same things, but that's okay. What we're here to do is to educate our listeners and other patients or caregivers of patients that they are like you said, their own best advocate, and that you can't give up. There's ways you can find the right doctor, but you have to know what you need to bring and what you need to say and what the questions you need to ask. And this is what, why your testimonial here and your journey is so important with us.
Absolutely. Yes.
So when you're going to this doctor, you went through the 2 hours, and then what happened?
So I'm going to say a big part of that 2.5 hour appointment was also a component of education. How many times do you go to a doctor's office and they literally sit down with you and explain a little bit from what did they learn in med school type of thing? So he handed me journal articles. He drew diagrams to kind of like help me understand what was going on and develop a level of trust that he's understanding and he's wanting to take me to a better place.
Yeah.
But then I will say, then started the whole, I'll call it a treatment plan. We are so much a, fast food culture where it's like, hey, give me a pill and let me be just fine to walk out the door. He said, this is going to take time, but you need to trust me. And so for the better part of 2 to 3 years, I had regular ongoing appointments. The appointments were with some pharmaceuticals, not that I hadn't tried in the past to try any sort of pharmaceuticals, but I wasn't a huge proponent of it, but I was like, I'll try anything. So he did have me on a regimen of some prescription.
Was your major symptom the constipation, IBS with constipation?
IBS, constipation, and abdominal pain were the 2 primary. So pain 24/7, 365.
Oh God.
24/7, 365, trying to be a mother to 3, a wife and a full-time employee. What he helped me understand is I was essentially distracting myself to manage pain. And so that, caused some issues in the brain. Because I was not managing pain in a way that we're designed to. Yes, I was having the issues of constipation. That was my predominant, I will say, GI issue. There was things like bloating, or early satiety, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Boy, you're really educated in all these GI terms. I'm impressed.
I probably had some. There were phrases I would say early on that they talked about leaky gut and your gut bacteria and all that. Like there's all these things going on, but he basically said none of that matters unless you have the brain gut communication pathway functioning again the way it's designed to.
Yeah.
So he had me on some medication, but then he also introduced me to something called CBT, and I don't know if
cognitive behavioral. Oh yes, we are big proponents of that. In fact, we have done some podcast webinars, and we have some great resources on GI on demand for that.
Life changing. And I think that his treatment approach was holistic for me. It was just get the false thinking out of your head, put the right thinking in your head, align your body with the right balance of pharmaceuticals to essentially position your body to heal. Like that's really, our bodies are designed so intricately, and doctors are really just coming alongside, helping position the body to get back to where it's supposed to be. So CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, was life-changing. I walked into the office the very first time with the CBT, the therapist, and said, I don't know why I'm here. And she just started asking questions. And, eventually now I can look back and I go, wow, I get it. I was my own worst enemy because I had a lot of thought patterns that were essentially causing me to be in a continuous state of pain management.
And it sounds like this vicious cycle. And until you address the root cause and not trying to, put Band-Aids on some of the symptoms. God, this is so inspiring. I hope our listeners are really inspired by your story. And I think they will be, because we've heard this over and over again, and people struggling for years, some even longer than you, believe it or not. And it's like, oh my God, like we've got to help these people.
Exactly. And it's like, don't give up. Know that there are doctors that really do want to help, but it's not, we have to kind of break away from, there are a lot of good things about modern medicine and Western medicine, but if we're not looking at, let's say body, mind, spirit, and everything that's going on in your life, and addressing it holistically, we're going to miss some things. And I also want to say a little bit of a comment about, I went down probably every alternative path possible. And I am not, there are some really, really wonderful alternative paths for certain things. Where I was, there was nothing that any alternative path could do for me. And this doctor that I saw that did that seminar, he said in a very polite way, he said, there's a reason that I have a medical degree. I went to school for this many years. Some people who are in that alternative healthcare space have really good intentions. They don't have the same knowledge. So it's not a
one or the other.
Or nothing. It's not one or the other, but it's knowing when a medical doctor with an MD can help the situation versus, I'll always go to a massage therapist, or there's certain things.
and that's why they call it complementary and alternative medicine, because it's really meant to be a complement. And some things, they work they're synergistic with other things that a medical doctor would recommend for us.
Absolutely.
I love that you had such an open mind and heart to get the right answers, and to be, I'm sure it wasn't easy sitting in the room for 2.5 hours and just like spilling every detail of your life, and your husband's there, which I'm sure he lived too, to hear all the complaining and all the struggle, and it affects everything. And that's not an easy thing to do, but you did it. And so how long before you started feeling better? And what did the IBS-C, has it gone away? Are you still managing it? Is your day-to-day life now, is it continuously easier, or, do you have, what's that like now?
I am worlds better. I have my life back. I will say it didn't happen overnight. And I will also say to anyone listening, trust the process. I didn't, if you think about like a ball of yarn that was all knotted together, it didn't get knotted together overnight. And that's kind of a picture of where I was after 8 years of, keep in mind, this started with a lung infection, and it just tanked all systems in my body, but my GI, along with then the mental health that came with that, I was not in a great place. So it took time. And I was having regular visits or phone calls with the doctor, and he was almost like coaching me. It was where I was like ready to give up. He's like, don't give up, just we're going to tweak this, or we're going to try that. And little by little by little by little, I was like, oh my gosh, I gained weight, or, oh my gosh, like,
and I know we're talking about IBS-C. So were you able to have not the struggles with having bowel movements? Was it more regular? Did you feel back to normal again with the IBS-C?
So I'll preface it by saying he did have me on a medication that was designed to ultimately evacuate everything. So part of that was allowing the brain to not think about it. So it was the medicine was doing that portion for me. And I got to a place where I said, I'd really like to wean off of all meds. So it was a wean off process of different medications that I was on. And, honestly, I don't want to say like, the digestive tract ultimately got to a better place where there was healing. But yes, can I poop now regularly? Yes.
and we laugh about it, but it can be really uncomfortable, and just it changes your life, and it's really difficult. And with the IBS-C, you bring up a good point. Like you said, you wanted to get off, try different treatment plan or not rely on certain things all the time. And this brings me to one of our last points is the shared decision making that you had with the doctor, the collaborative approach. You guys were both, partners in this and trying to find a resolution. So it was an open and honest communication. If you didn't feel like something was working, did you feel comfortable to say, hey, doc, can we try this? Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a really important point.
It's an incredibly important point. And I think one of his strategies was really to put the burden of the decision-making on me, because it's a matter of you are going back to your own best advocate. And am I more readily to adopt something that is what I ultimately want for me? Or am I going to do it just because the doctor wants me to do it? I don't know how to play into that space, but I always had a voice into it. And there were times where I would say, I really value your opinion. I would like you to essentially steer me. If I wanted to remain on all of the pharmaceuticals that I was on, I had that choice. If I wanted to wean off of it, I had that choice. And it's an open door. I can go back anytime. And there were certainly in the, I'll say, wean off stage, there was a lot of interaction. Is this really the right decision? Let me try going back on that. So, and for some people, they will be on certain prescriptions for the rest of their lives. That's okay.
And it is. And I was going to bring that is okay, because sometimes you feel better. And our first inclination is okay, I'm done. I don't want to take this anymore. And that's the worst thing in a lot of cases, because then you kind of go back to that tough health situation and you have to start all over again. So this is why it's so important to have that collaborative shared decision making, that you trust your doctor. He's going to say, I understand you. I understand you want to try something else, but let's stick with this for at least this amount of time to see if there's any change.
Yes.
And then we can do another approach. So that's so important.
Yes.
What other tips? Do you have any tips for patients that are maybe struggling with IBS with constipation? It's not an easy thing. We've done for those of you who aren't familiar with the term IBS with constipation, we've done other podcasts and we have other informational materials about IBS-C. It's a huge burden, lifestyle burden. There's some recent studies that show just how impactful it is to patients. And surveys were done recently that show that the majority of patients aren't satisfied with their current treatment plan. So there's a lot of people suffering out there. So I wanted to ask you, Karen, because you've gone through this in a big way and not an easy way. What do you recommend to other people in your situation, or that you were in their situation with IBS-C and not having the right treatment or the right feeling like they were being heard? What do you recommend for them? Or tips for them?
Yeah. So my tip is stop the insanity. And what I mean by that is because that's where I was. I wanted health, and I was going after anything I could find that would provide health and wellness for me. There is a segment of doctors that understand IBS-C from what's called DGBI perspective, and that's disorders of the gut brain interaction. I think I'm getting that right.
You're exactly right. You're going to be taking over my job soon.
I would find doctors that are well-versed in DGBI, because they are going to, what was told to me that very first visit is the gut and the brain are hardwired. And if you know anything about an electrical circuit, if there's anything that's not functioning between the gut and the brain, it's going to cause disruption. For some people, it's diarrhea. For others, it's constipation. So you got to get that right. So seek out stop the insanity, go to the right kind of healthcare provider. Don't ever give up. I have to say that again.
I love that. Have hope. And that's what we're all about here. We want you to have hope. There's some wonderful resources out there. We have Gastro Girl and GI On Demand, where you could find healthcare providers to help you their experience with disorders of the brain-gut interaction. The Rome Foundation does a wonderful job with all of their resources as well. Don't go down the path of, the insanity of Googling everything and following, all the Instagram tips. It can be overwhelming. Look at vetted evidence-based sources. But Karen, you've been amazing. You're such an inspiration, and I'm so glad you're feeling better. And I hope this touched at least one person, which I'm sure it did, to be able to know that you're going to be okay. Don't give up and keep trying, and you're going to feel better eventually.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It was great to be with you today.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.